up, Call of Duty fans? IHOLDSHIFT back with you, and we've got Pool B under the breakdown spotlight. Before we go into it, I just want to again mention the fact that I've gotten a lot of flame on my power rankings in the last 24 hours. Don't know why all of a sudden it's coming up, but you know, these are meant to stir conversation. They're obviously individual, kind of, I guess you'll say opinions, but they're based off of a lot of statistics. I would show you the spreadsheet, but I don't really feel like that's necessary. But I do take a lot of statistics into mind, as well as power index ratings as far as who teams have played, you know, strength of schedule, how teams have looked as a whole. It's not like I'm just sitting here looking at the standings and throwing darts at things. So I'm not drunk, very much so sober, for those of you that might think that I am. We'll find out. It's just for fun, all right? That's the biggest thing. Power rankings, things like that, just for fun. Prediction, things like this, just for fun. It's there to stir conversation. So you can hate on them as much as you want, but the whole purpose of these things are to start conversation, and I hope that you guys will join me in the comments for some of that conversation posting up this video. So let's take a look first and foremost at what the pools look like. We already went over Pool A. If you missed that, make sure you go back and check it out. We'll be looking at Pool B today, and of course, that features 100 Thieves on the very top, Red Reserve for the second spot, and then Enigma6 and Evil Geniuses to round out things in Pool B. And this is a very interesting pool. We'll start talking about 100 Thieves first, because this is the squad that has not changed much at all. In fact, hasn't changed at all since before the PLQ, and well, that's been a very back and forth season for the 100 Thieves so far this season, as again the PLQ showed instances where they almost lost to Mazer Gaming in overtime, had convincing losses versus Midnight, who we weren't sure, at least at that point at Midnight in the PLQ, was not a team that anyone was considering to be a major threat. At least that's how the desk had kind of phrased that. We had kind of picked them as being a potential dark horse. And they also lost to Pittsburgh Knights before coming back and actually winning out and finding themselves in a top 2 spot for the PLQ to get them in the CWL. We had them rated very low. That caused a lot of hate from you guys, but then they came out in week number 3 technically of the CWL and only went 1-2 with their only win coming up against Denial. But here's the thing about this 100 Thieves team. You have to feel really good about where they are now. I mean, they finished off the second week very, very strongly. That week number 4 in total, they went 12-2 over their 4 games, obviously going 4-0. And the biggest thing for me in this roster is the simple fact that 100 Thieves has looked a lot better across the control and hardpoint now specifically. They're 5-2 control. They're average 2.29 rounds a map for them, only giving up 1.14. That's the second best in the league. Actually, the average is the best in the league, but their win-loss ratio is that just barely behind Luminosity. But also, you take a look at what they're able to do in hardpoint. I don't have this listed on the screen here for you guys, but they are up a plus 48 differential in hardpoint. They're a total of, excuse me, 8-2 as far as win-loss ratios. Looking really, really solid throughout the entirety of the CWL in those 2 modes specifically. They have struggled a little bit when it comes to the search and destroy, but have picked it up obviously lately. My biggest question mark for this team is, can Kenny and Enable continue to play at the consistent level that they did in week number 4 of the CWL? I am pretty sold on this squad, but it's the simple fact of the matter that, again, all of the pool play stuff comes down to 1 day of gameplay. So if you don't play very well that day, or if you're not playing well at all, like if you're Kenny, you have a terrible day, you can start to cost in this pool very, very quickly, because this is not at all a bad pool. I mean, you look at Evil Geniuses, they're on the up and up after their win that they had in their week 2 and a lot of practice under their hands. Enigma6 with a pretty solid change, and Red Reserve is a team that can be very hot, but also very cold. So for me, this pool comes down to who will show up on the proper day. So that's kind of my take on 100 Thieves. I still think that this team wins out this pool, or at least finishes in the top 2 at worst case scenario. But my biggest question mark, and why I had them rated a little bit lower than the top 2 in my power rankings, was simply because I need to see some consistency out of Kenny and Enable before I can be 100% sold that this is the team that we thought they would be at the beginning of the year when the first rosters were announced. Switching things over to teams that are also red, we'll take a look at Red Reserve. And again, this is a team that I wish, I mean, copy-paste the same storyline, but a little bit lower on the ceiling as far as how much this team can actually reach up, at least in my personal opinion. They don't make any changes over the course of the Rostermania period, and they start off with a very strong 3-0 against Reciprocity, but then they kind of take a little bit of a tumble. They only finish at 4-3, 16-10 overall, just good enough for 4th place in Division A. And the thing about this team that kind of is hard to rate them is the fact that they're extremely average across everything. It's only a plus 13 differential in the hard point for averages for Red Reserve there. They're only up, it's a 5.4 average as far as what their Search and Destroy looks like, and it's a 2.43 to 2.14 average in the control. And their map records are also very average. Across the bat, it's 6.5 for the hard point, 5.3 for the Search, and 5.2 for the control. So yes, the 5.3, 5.2 makes you feel good, but a lot of those wins were at 3-2 situations. They have not really convincingly taken over a set in my book. Of course, they have a pretty solid record, and they played up against some decent teams. The biggest thing is that when you look at them versus Evil Geniuses, which is the only thing we have to go off of, they are 1-1 against them, the 3-0 in the CWL, but losing to them 2-3 in the pool play. And that's my biggest thing with Red is, in pools specifically, they've been a little bit MIA. We saw that at Vegas, and we saw that again at the PLQ. So Fort Worth has to be different. Is it just that they're not comfortable in a different environment? Do they have to get acclimated to situations? There's a lot of things to be considered, and I think a lot of the issues for this team go beyond the actual gameplay itself. I think all of those little external issues end up affecting their gameplay more than it is just the fact that their gameplay is inconsistent. I think it's just those external factors. So for me, I think I still have Red Reserve, as you take a look at this pool, finishing in the 2 spot. For me, it just comes down to, can they continue to beat Enigma6? Or pardon me, can they continue to beat Evil Geniuses and find the W versus Enigma6? I think Enigma6 could very well be a very good team in this pool. It just comes down to, will they get acclimated with their new player? And that's the talking point for Enigma6, is that they do have a new player in hand. As you will see, it will be Chino coming in for Cade. And this change I like. The way that I like to kind of analogize this trade up is the fact that it's kind of like looking at a half glass empty versus a half glass full. Performance wise, these guys are pretty much the same across the board. 0.98 with the respawn KD for Chino, 0.89 for Cade. It's literally just a plus 0.1 differential in each of the categories between the KDs for both of these guys. The biggest thing about it is Chino has a higher upside. He has that veteran presence that Cade kind of lacks a little bit when it comes to getting into those clutch and kind of down to the last minute moments that you like to see, kind of those players that are notable and veterans step up. Chino definitely has that ability. But the problem that I have is that Chino has not showed that this game. In G2, I would say between him and Blast, they were two of the weaker parts of that roster that kind of kept G2 from getting through the PLQ and into the CWL. So dropping away Cade, bringing in Chino, you add a veteran aspect. I think you add a higher ceiling, but as far as immediate improvement, it's marginal. And I think it's going to come down to trying to find the familiarity. And for me, in this pool specifically, I'm looking at Frosty and Kismet. They need to have really solid performances for Enigma6. We haven't seen them play consistently yet, and I'm going to need to see that sooner rather than later. Specifically for this team, though, as you take a look at some of their rundown, they're 3-4, 12-16 in maps. They finished 5th in Division B. The biggest thing is they're currently 2-7 in Search and Destroy, which is the second worst in the CWL, which is why a trade up for Chino makes a little bit more sense, because again, that veteran notion to kind of bring in some experience with this game mode against these teams is the bigger thing, is that he has experience playing against these teams for a long period of time, will help bring some extra strategy to Enigma6. But that's the biggest thing, is they need to try to find some improvement there, because 2-7 at an average of 3.67 rounds for them versus the 5.56 against them is not super great. They're really only kind of relying on their hard points so far, as they sit at, you know, a measly plus 13 or so average between the hard point differentials, and they sit at just an even 6-6 map record. But you need to see improvement, I think, just in the SOG gameplay coming out of Kismet, being able to get Frosty involved as he was during the PLQ. That was the team that impressed me most. I have yet to be at that same level of impression from this team since then, and when it comes down to Fort Worth, they need to try to find that extra gameplay coming through Diabolic. It'd be great to see him show up. It'd be great to see General pop off. But as far as Chino coming into the mix, I think it puts a couple of roles into the mix, because Chino's mostly been that ICR player. General has been that player for Enigma6, so there's going to be a little bit of a role swap, and I think that this team finishes probably 3rd in this group, because of a little bit of unfamiliarity with this roster, as well as the potential of a role swap. We'll finish off this pool talking about Evil Geniuses, who also made a pretty considerable change. And if you guys are fans of my videos, you've heard me say that Evil Geniuses, at the end of week 2 of the CWL, you were hoping you could come back and play in week 3, because honestly, they were getting better, they were showing up, and their stats were starting to grow as well, with the exception of the Search and Destroy, where they still sit at a very obviously terrible stat line of 0-8, only averaging 2.38 rounds per map on Search and Destroy. You need to fix that up if you're Evil Geniuses. But they do make a change, and again, the graphics that you're going to see provided for you, you guys got to go and follow Lion Man on Twitter. He's the guy that was helping collaborate with this video and was able to put together these cards for me, as well as for you guys, as he posts on his Twitter and the Reddit all the time. So make sure you guys go give him a follow. But here's kind of the differential that you see. You take a look at Attach, a 1.02 respawn KD and a 0.88 search and destroy KD. Not the greatest, not the worst. That's all from the PLQ. But you compare that to what Facento was able to do during just the CWL in specific, and Facento was sitting at a 0.81 respawn and a 0.59 search and destroy with overall with an overall S&D KD, or pardon me, with an overall KD of just 0.78. Attach brings a 1.0 to the mix. So this is a flat-out upgrade, and bringing in a veteran like Attach will help bring a little bit more consistency to the search and destroy, you hope. But the biggest problem is that, again, can you find success in the SOG line, I think, for this team when you take a look at it? Because it hasn't been great in the past. It needs to be better. You take a look at just what those sub roles are. Royalty's been okay, and beyond that, there really hasn't been a dedicated true second sub because Facento was that other player. So, again, who is going to take that second sub role open? Will it be Attach, or will you see somebody like potentially Fellow going back over and trying to put himself on a SOG? Someone else is going to have to pick up that role unless they run 3 Maddoxes the entire time, which can be favorable on a couple of maps, but of course unfavorable on a number of others. And I think the cons would outweigh the pros in that instance. So for me, I still think that this team has a lot to figure out, but the upgrade into Attach from Facento is absolutely great, and one that will definitely show some improvement for this squad. Again, it just comes down to me who shows up in the pool, because you take a look back at these pools, every game is being played in these pools on the first day. So you don't really have the time to get acclimated to the environment, the climate, the venue itself. You just got to jump in, get ready to go. You might have a couple of games on main stage. You might not have any on the main stage. How does that favor you or unfavor you? It kind of depends on the teams, but I think you take a look at this pool, and again, I'm just going to finish and say it. I have 100 Thieves and Red Reserve as the top 2, Enigma6 and Evil Geniuses 3-4, just as it's listed. I could see Evil Geniuses doing something crazy, but I just don't know if Attach brings enough to the mix to instantly make this team a higher fragger. It just comes down for me if will 100 Thieves and Red Reserve play at the consistent high level that we would expect from them, because if they don't, then this pool gets very interesting, and anything could absolutely happen. But that's my take on Pool B. Stay tuned. We'll have Pool C with you guys not too far after this video gets posted as well, so make sure you guys are staying tuned. If you like this kind of content, I will be bringing out CWL recaps throughout every single day of Fort Worth to get you caught up on the action that you missed and what's most important storyline-wise. And of course, make sure you follow on Twitter if you want to go flame my power rankings, as everyone seems to want to do. But again, if you guys did tune in all the way through, I appreciate your viewership and, of course, being a part of this community. You guys are the reason why I continue to do this, and it's been a lot of fun for me. Hopefully, it's also fun for you. Until next time, hope you keep pulling it down. Later, bye-bye.